So for the past several months, the #1 book on the New York Times bestseller list is a book called Being Mortal. Most of the time, the books that make it that high on the list are like celebrity memoirs or, heroic war veteran stories, but not this time. This time it's a book written by a doctor who noticed how hard it was for us to talk about the one thing that everybody knows is true, but that we don't ever want to acknowledge, that we're mortal, that we will actually one day die. So the most religious moment that Dr. King ever had wasn't in a seminary and it wasn't in a church building. It was at his kitchen table. Almost 60 years ago, around midnight, Dr. King got a phone call. It was somebody threatening him and his family because of the work he was doing with civil rights, and they told him they were going to bomb his house. And after it, because the threat seemed so real, Dr. King couldn't go back to sleep. He just made some coffee and sat at his kitchen table, thinking about his wife and his 10-week-old daughter, thinking about one day that bomb would come. And Dr. King prayed a prayer to God in that moment. He said, "God, I think what I'm doing is right and just, but I've come to the end of my rope. I cannot do this on my own. I'm going to need help." And in that moment, he heard the voice of God say to him, "Stand up for truth, Martin. Stand up for justice. Stand up for what is right. You will never be alone." And for the rest of his life, that's exactly what Dr. King did. Matter of fact, the night before he was assassinated, after the civil rights movement had seen so much success, Dr. King, in one final sermon, stood up and almost in a prophetic way said, "I tonight have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I've seen it. And tonight I fear no man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Think about that. I fear no man. That's how to live. A couple of months ago, my wife and I got to have dinner with Kent and Amber Brantley for some fundraiser. We were eating at the Macaroni Grill in Dallas, and the most interesting thing happened. A couple of different times during the evening, total strangers would walk up to Kent and just give him a hug and walk away. And Amber, his wife, said something like, "This happens all the time." I found that so fascinating. I mean, this guy is famous for having the world's most deadly, most contagious disease, and people want to hug him. But more than just that, it's that that's all people want. They're not coming up to him and trying to get an autograph with the world-famous Ebola doctor. They're not trying to take a selfie with him. They just want to say thank you. Why is that? Maybe it's because of the way that Kent and Amber have served the world so well. Or maybe it's because of the way that he's talked so humbly about his experience ever since. But I think the real reason, what's really captured the world's imagination with his story, is the fact that he faced his own death. And he did it well. Not that he wasn't scared to die. Not that he wasn't anxious or afraid. Not that he wasn't sad. But that he was willing to look death in the face and say, "There are things more important than bending my knee to you." And it has captured the world's imagination that this young father wouldn't orient his entire life around death, but actually thought there were things more important than just survival. It has put him on the cover of Time magazine and in the hearts of people around the world. For the longest time, Christians weren't known for their doctrine. They weren't known for what they believed or how great their programs were or how big their buildings were. They were known for how they died. So it was in 64 AD that Nero began to persecute the first Christians. He blamed the fire on them and put them to some horrendous deaths. But an interesting thing started to happen. As these Christians were dying these horrible deaths, they came up with this chant, "To God the glory." And every time you would threaten them, every time you would try to negotiate with them to why they should worship an idol or why they should not follow Jesus or believe in this crucified carpenter, they would all say the same thing, "To God the glory." Sometimes while they were lit on fire, the final words they would say were the chant, "To God the glory." That's what this series is about. It's about this deep awareness that we should have, that life is a gift, all of it. That it is a gift from God, and what we do with it is our gift back to Him. Because that's how to live, and that's how to die. To God the glory.